So we'll go to Peter Shreeve, who I'm hoping is here and able to ask his question. Peter, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good
Lovely.
afternoon. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to raise this on behalf of all those people working in schools. And I'd just like to comment on your group member, Susan, who suggested a positive alliance with groups like the National Education Union and declared that I am the Assistant District Secretary of the National Education Union on the Isle of Wight and would consider it certainly an avenue worth pursuing. England's new Children Commissioner and others feel pupils should not have to self-isolate if somewhere in their school bubble tests positive for COVID. This to me feels somewhat bold in the light of worries, turn that off. This feels somewhat bold in the light of worries about new variants, the inexorable rise in school cases and absences in the effects of long COVID, so that schools can get back to normal as soon as possible and as safely as possible. Apart from the usual masks, better ventilation and more frequent testing, what additional mitigations could be taken? And finally, what is the realistic likelihood of having a September normality for schools?
Thank you very much, Peter. I mean, it's an interesting question about mitigations, because obviously we know that the principal mitigations like ventilation are not being effectively deployed in schools at the moment. So there's a lot we could be doing that we're not doing yet. Zubaida, did I see your hand up?
Yes, I mean, Peter, I am so frustrated. We're all so frustrated and dismayed at where we're at with schools, where here we are 16 months in and there are no mitigations. And just when I thought that I had got my head around it, we heard this week, you know, the Children's Commissioner and others talking about getting rid of literally the only mitigation we have left in schools, which is self-isolation. You know, it's literally the only thing we have. So getting rid of self-isolation is really letting the virus rip through primary and secondary schools. We know primary schools, you know, didn't have face masks. We know in primary schools there was no lateral flow testing. So I don't know what else there would be to buffer the spread of an incredibly transmissible Delta variant in the schools. And that does lead to September and what's going to happen, given that we know that come autumn, infection rates are likely to go up again. And I think even by then we won't have children vaccinated. So it really does leave me pondering, you know, what else is there? That said, we've known from the outset, as Alice has said, what needs to be done. We've said from the outset that we need better ventilation in schools, we need better air purifiers in schools, we need smaller class sizes, we need children to be spread out much more, we need face masks reinstated in secondary schools, we need all of those things. And the government have the summer. I mean, quite honestly, the government have had many an opportunity, many a break where they could have done more, but they have this summer. And if they don't do that, then our children will really be left exposed because they won't be vaccinated, there won't be any mitigation measures, and they will have taken a self-isolation, which is the only thing that breaks the chain of transmission.
Thank you very much, Zubaida. And Susan.
Well, Zubaida mentioned in passing, but I did want to raise this issue about the class sizes, because it's always helpful to look at countries across the world in this situation. We've done spectacularly badly in the UK, and we have to ask ourselves, why have we done so badly? We know that we've got one of the most countries with one of the most crowded classrooms, certainly in Europe. And they don't have to be like this, just as Steve talked about housing. You know, we should step back and really look at the society we are in and what we're doing to our population and doing to our children, that we don't have to. There's a lot of money in this country. It's very unevenly distributed, but it doesn't have to be. So we called many times last year for this, right at the beginning, to use a lot of the closed buildings, hotels and other buildings that weren't being used, that have large rooms that could accommodate classes of children. Another thing that was never taken up. But it's not too late to think about those things. So, I mean, it is frustrating when sensible, rational solutions that could be a win-win are not taken up. But I don't think we should leave that off the agenda. I think, you know, in that list of mitigations that Zubaida outlined, I think having larger spaces with fewer children is an obvious one.
Thank you very much, Susan. I remember, months ago when we were discussing this and saying that actually there was a staff issue as well there, and that would require more teachers. But we've had 18 months to train up more teachers, and actually we could have plugged the gap with teaching assistants as well. And there's been a complete absence of any intention to do that. And of course, what we've seen is small bubbles, which are large anyway, because our class sizes are large in Britain compared with most other countries, have become larger and larger and larger, meaning that when a bubble isolates, it affects often hundreds of children rather than that idea of keeping small bubbles. Kit, brief word from you, please.
Yeah, really quickly. I mean, you mentioned all the measures that we want to put in schools. The only other thing that you didn't mention, Peter, that we could be doing is vaccination. And people have said to me, well, vaccination isn't going to fix the problem at the moment of 370,000 school children isolating, but we want to stop this happening in September. Kids have had the worst time. They've been so unfairly impacted by this disease. They've had 2 periods when schools have been entirely closed. It's just absolutely crazy. And yet we're still not doing everything that we can to try to make sure that schools aren't in that situation again and that children aren't missing out on their education. So as well as all the other benefits of vaccinating children, protecting them from ill health issues, that's another thing that can be done to stop them from missing school.